Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Derek Pascarella here, otherwise known as A-Team, and we're taking a look at something pretty cool, the FDX68 floppy drive emulator for the Sharp X68000, compatible with a bunch of different models. As you can see, it's a board that connects to, this is a Raspberry Pi via the GPIO pins. I've got a Wi-Fi USB dongle there, so I can actually just remotely connect to it with no need for an external display. Got a nifty little power switch, which you can find on Amazon. All of this stuff will be linked, by the way, in the video description, and non-affiliate either, because I'm not that important. And yeah, a nice little kit I put together with some other stuff that I found on Amazon, little braces and such, so that it's just, you know, not a bare PCB hitting the ground. In the video today, we're going to look at actually installing the switch kit, which is something that allows you to toggle between using the external floppy emulator for drives 0, 1, or 2, 3, as well as the internal floppy drives for 0, 1, or 2, 3. There's jumpers on the PCB that allow you to do that. We get into that in a little more detail later in the video. And once we go through the installation of the switch kit and such, we're going to be looking at the basics of getting the Pi up and running and the using of the actual FDX68 software to mount disk images and use them. So buckle in, here we go. All right, let's do this. Oh, the joys of opening an X68000. We've got our SD card extender here. I'm gonna have to loosen this up to remove that, and there's a Henkin Bancho Pro for our SCSI emulator. We're gonna have to get to those floppy drives, and yeah, let's keep on going. All right, so if this is our external floppy and hard drive connections, this is all going to be coming out to replace with a new version of this that actually has a button switch that lets me choose between internal and external floppies in slots 0, 1. And this will be coming out, but put back, and we'll just have to figure out what's going on with all these other cables. All right. After disconnecting this guy, so we've got this one to disconnect as well. Then let's see about getting this whole piece out. Well, all right, so the original external hard drive and external floppy boards here have been removed. That was a lot of fun, as always with these machines. We are going to be replacing that, or excuse me, we'll be replacing this guy with this. And this original connector will be 1-to-1 with what we see here. This will give us a nice standard 34-pin flat ribbon cable connection on the back. That'll go right into the floppy drive emulator, the FDX68. And then this extra connector here that I just spent 10 minutes banging my head against the wall over is actually going to connect directly to the controller board down here rather than coming from the original disk drive. Maybe because it's first thing in the morning, but it took me a little longer than I'm proud to admit to figure out what the directions were trying to tell me. Now the cool thing about this board is that it's got a little switch on the back. I'll listen to that satisfying switch click action, and this will actually allow us to switch between using these two drives as drives 0 and 1, or the two virtual drives with the floppy emulator as 0 and 1. And normally you'd say, like, why would you care? Let these be 0, 1, let the external be 2 and 3. But the thing is, if you've got a multi-floppy game that takes up, let's say, 2 disks, for example, sure, you can boot to the first disk, but you won't be able to support multiple disks in that case. Right, so we could boot to the first, boot to disk 2, but you would not be able to have that software see disk 3 as the second disk. That's only possible when it's in positions 0 and 1, so that's why I'm going through all of this madness here. And if I gave a really shoddy or butchered explanation, I apologize. I literally just woke up and I want to do this before work, so let's proceed. Okay, so before we put all of this back here, we are removing the flat cable from the floppy drive to the control board down here. And instructions say to connect the included flat cable here, which is now going to run on the new board to this box header. So let's do that. Actually, before I get too far ahead of myself, I checked the instructions. The strain relief, so this plastic piece along here has to be removed so that the short box header here can actually lock properly. So I believe I can do that with some finesse without, you know, breaking anything. Yeah, let's get to it. All right, well, I was able to do that with a little pair of pliers. You'll notice this tiny bit of electrical tape. I just barely nicked the cable so that you can almost see just a little bit of the, you know, the metal wiring exposed. I mean, it's really nothing, and I know the cable's fine, but I just covered it with a little bit of electrical tape. I don't know if interference from just the sheer power of all the, you know, Tesla levels of electricity inside of this thing could cause some type of shenanigans. So anyway, comes off relatively easily. As you can see, you know, one end is broken off. So my suggestion, since you don't really care about preserving this thing, use a pair of pliers to right here to pull outward in this direction. And once you get this first one kind of broken off, obviously this brace comes off and this guy will slide right out. So that is what I did. All right, let's carry on. This will be going here, and we're getting closer to having the switch installed, and closer still to actually testing the goddamn floppy emulator. Hey, what do you know? It fits. All right. As I said, we'll be connecting this over here and keeping it moving. Okay, so now that the included ribbon cable is connected down there, I've got the other end of it connected to the switch kit. Now, I just spent the last 10 minutes or so in a bit of confusion, because if you look at the pictures on the website for the position of the lockable header and the regular header, they are swapped. And actually the instructions, they refer to the regular header being in the middle and vice versa. So I was a bit confused. I thought I was gonna have to remove the strain relief on both cables, but as you can see, this one is higher profile and locks in just fine. So the next piece here would be to connect this guy to the regular header there, which used to be connected to this, and you can see why I was confused. I figured, okay, so the original board had this lockable, the new one has a lockable, it should be at the end, but if you see, this is much shorter profile. So actually it looks like it was a redesign potentially of the board, but the instructions potentially have not been updated to reflect it. That's my assessment. But anyway, glad I encountered that, because now it's at least documented in this horrible video. All right, let's keep moving. Holy shit. So I finally got at least the board and the original bracket in there. My advice to you, take many photos of exactly how this shielding was oriented, inserted. When you remove the bracket, try to keep them together as best you can, because you may say to yourself, there is no way this shielding will fit. I don't understand. It makes no sense. And you might be right, but alas, it does fit. It does make sense. The little metal teeth on the bottom of the shielding kind of like go under in here, and it seems very like mismatched and such, but yeah, it fits. Now I need to, as we see here, trying to put things back. Next I will need to slap this guy on top, connect the original cable, screw things together, and I think the switch kit is done at that point. The only thing that is a little odd to me is the original cable that was going from the floppy drive to the controller board is just loose in here now. If I don't amend this video at any point as you continue watching it, then yeah, that is correct. So according to the instructions, it seems like that's the case. Anyway, let's carry on with the rebuild. Okay, reassembled. Switch kit is here. Connected to the FDX68 and the Pi. Let's take a quick look at actually configuring and setting up the Pi before we keep on moving. Alright, so just a quick look at the Pi configuration. I mean, obviously, if you're watching this video, considering doing this, you know, a lot of this stuff is not new information to you, so this won't be an insanely deep dive, but just the basics, right? I'm using a 3B, so I could select that here. Now the OS, this is very important. We need to go to the Other category and select the 32-bit light distribution. We can choose our storage device, and then after that, highly suggest, unless you feel like you know, connecting the Pi to a display, highly suggest, you know, just use a USB Wi-Fi dongle, and even go so far as applying some default settings. Give it a host name, login credentials, get it, you know, your Wi-Fi details in here, etc. I've got password authentication enabled, which I later turned into passwordless with a key, and disable telemetry, so you're not sending data back to the Pi folks. And then after that, just click yes, and you are done there. Okay, so let's look at SSHing to the Pi. You saw that I used a custom host name before, and since the initial setup of the Pi, I set up passwordless authentication with an SSH key. I also added this nifty little ASCII art bit to the message of the day file, just optional stuff that I felt like doing, just to make it nicer. So from the links in the video description, right, you're going to be downloading the actual toolkit, which you can do like this. And what we're going to want to do is actually extract this to something in your path. In Linux and Unix world, these are default paths. Same thing in Windows, really, where if you were to issue a command, you know, it looks for the executable or binary or script in one of those default directories. So I'm not going to actually execute this because I've already done so, but the command would look something like this. Since we're going to put this to user local bin, I want to exclude some of the things that are inside of that tarball archive. And I believe it's just these three files. Well, docs is a directory, readme and version are files. XZVF, and then the name of the tarball archive, and then we would output it to something like user local bin. I'm not going to press enter and do it, but that would be how our command would look, and then all of those executables are in your path. Let me go ahead and actually get rid of the archive because I don't need it. And yeah, you can even see that if I were to issue one of the commands, well, they're already there in my default path, so you know I can look and and they're there, and we'll be using these to actually mount images and such in a moment, but that's how our initial SSH would work. And now let's just look at getting files onto the device, actual disk images. So using virtually any FTP client of your choice, this is just WinSCP here, you can initiate an SFTP session to the Pi. You can see I've got an images directory in my home directory where I've got some disk images, and you might not recognize this FDX file extension. It's a kind of custom format used by the FDX68, but there is a way to convert them. Well, actually there's a DIM, you can see. Oh, there's two. Yeah, so two more standard ones. But there's a built-in tool to actually facilitate conversion. Again, it's all done in the, or rather all explained in the documentation and such that I'll be linking in the video description, but I'll just show you a quick example of how that works. Okay, so back to SSH. If I go to my images directory, I can actually use the FDXconv tool to convert one of these. So I've already done so, but let's say I've got a DIM, or really it supports a wide array of disk image formats, so it wouldn't just have to be a DIM here, it could be many different kinds. But let's say this is our original floppy disk dump, and I wanted to convert it. It would be quite easy. So there's our input file, and our output file. There's some other options too. I haven't needed to really use many of them, unless you're using like D88, D77, etc. type formats. But if they're just DIM or some of the other more common ones, then it's been quite straightforward for me. So now that it's been converted, all right, we can see I've got my FDX image. I'm just going to delete that because there's no reason to keep it. And then we get into the process of actually mounting the disk itself. So I'll show you how that works. And we're going to be using the fddmu command. And we have to do this as root or using sudo, so we have the proper level of permissions. We can see if I look here, you know, there's nothing mounted at all. I'll do Control-Shift-C to close that. I can look at the help, and you can see it's pretty straightforward syntax. Disk 0, disk 1, and some options. So let's say I want to use this for disk 0. I'm going to use this for disk 1, and then I'll do verbose mode. And the disk images are mounted. Now I know you can't see this, but if I look over at the FDX68, the board that connects to the Pi via the GPIO pins, I'll actually see a green LED light up for both the disks 0 and 1. Now, let me just pause here. Do I wish there was some type of easy-to-use menu? Of course I do. Do I wish there was something GoTech-like or even similar to The Thing by Caius Arcades for the FM Town Smarty? Right, of course I do. I wish there was an easy way to have all my disk images there and just kind of navigate through them, but it's not so horrible. Every now and then when you actually need to use a disk image to SSH to this little Pi and do it this way. I mean, after all, you know, we have those hard drive images now where you pretty much have everything at your disposal. So ideally, this is not something you're going to need to do a ton of. And once you get the hang of it, honestly, it's really, really quite simple. So now that the disk images are mounted, let's go check out actually booting to them using the X68000 itself. Okay, here we are back at the X68000. We can see in the floppy emulator the green lights are on, so disks 1 and 2 in position 0 and 1 are mounted. Everything's still plugged in exactly the same as before. The button on the switch kit is depressed inwards as to give this IDs 0 and 1. So we'll go ahead, power on the computer. I'll hold down the option 1 key on the keyboard to boot to floppy. And hey, there you go. We can see here the red activity LED is going. And Trojan here, disk 1, is getting things ready and prepared. Starting to load data. and we will know that it's done here shortly. And yeah, that's really all there is to it. I say that as if it was just a walk in the park. I mean, I guess it could be a whole lot worse, but the kit works quite well. Just a little bit of upfront effort to get things, installed and configured, but really not all that bad. You can see now that the disc 2 LED is active. And yeah, it's reading all the data from the data disk. In fact, interestingly, we can actually see that the first disk was automatically ejected, and we can even see the real-time reading right here in front of us. Pretty cool stuff. And there we go. Voila, a thing of beauty. Well, I'll turn the volume down a bit here. That's the story of the FDX68, the installation, configuration with the switch kit, which I think is kind of necessary in my opinion. And yeah, operation and all that. I hope it was informative. And for those who are considering buying one, as I said, all the links in the description. And hopefully there will be another round for overseas buyers in the very near future. Thank you so much for watching.